the we are collaborating and supporting just the Florida Watch team in hosting this press conference. As folks on the call know, Governor DeSantis is traveling up to Pennsylvania tomorrow to make a speech at a right-wing conference, and we thought it was important to get folks together from both Florida and Pennsylvania to talk about the things that Governor DeSantis has been focused on and how those are at odds with what we have here in Pennsylvania. We have some really great guests here today. From Florida, we have State Representative Eskamani and State Senator Shevrin Jones. We also, from Pennsylvania, have Moira Kaleida from the Alliance to Reclaim Our Schools, Eric Hagarty, who's the former Pennsylvania Secretary of Education, and joining us hopefully shortly will be State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta from here in Pennsylvania. So I wanted to get us kicked off to start. I think one of the things that we think is really important for folks to know, particularly not from Pennsylvania, but also for us to remember, is that in 2022, candidates running up and down the ballot embraced a lot of the agenda that Governor DeSantis has pursued in Florida. Everything from the crony capitalism of rewarding big corporations to the culture wars of targeting our trans community, to attacking public education and trying to pit teachers and schools against parents and kids. And what we saw in 2022 is that this agenda was overwhelmingly rejected. Doug Mastriano, who ran for governor here in Pennsylvania, was really embraced Governor DeSantis's agenda to a T. Governor DeSantis was arguably his biggest supporter outside of Donald Trump, came here to do an event for him. Doug Mastriano campaigned on making Pennsylvania, quote unquote, the Florida of the North. Doug Mastriano lost by 15 points and was overwhelmingly rejected across Pennsylvania. We saw candidates up and down the ballot embrace attacks on public schools, attacks on vulnerable communities, and the kinds of economic policies that are failing so many in Florida, thanks to Governor DeSantis. So we thought it was really important to set some context as Governor DeSantis comes here to spread his message of division and discord and preach for the kind of chaos that he's pursued in Florida, that there is very little room for that here in Pennsylvania, and the overwhelming majority of voters have rejected his policies around abortion, guns, public education, and attacks on vulnerable communities. And so we're really excited to the guests we have. To kick it off, I'm going to kick it to one of our friends from Florida, State Representative Eskamani.
Thank you so much for having me, and hello to my colleagues in Pennsylvania as well. My name is Representative Eskamani, proudly serving in the 42nd District in Orlando, Florida. And of course, we are in the middle of legislative session right now, so things are pretty intense in Florida as Governor Ron DeSantis prepares to run for president. He has basically leveraged every bullet pulpit he has to be as extreme as possible. And I have always shared, especially with our national audiences, that we are, as a state, the canary in a coal mine. You do not want what Florida is experiencing in your state, let alone in this country. Governor DeSantis has not prioritized the needs of everyday people. Right now, our state is experiencing a major housing crisis. Renters are facing skyrocketing rates with no place to turn. Our three main investor-owned utility companies, Duke, TECO, and Florida Power and Light, have been given permission time and time again to increase rates on consumers. And there's no end in sight to when that will stop. And of course, we have a property insurance crisis that, despite special sessions which have actually taken away consumer rights, the rates continue to rise. Meanwhile, while these everyday problems are ignored, we've seen Governor DeSantis wage culture battles, attacking LGBTQ plus people, attacking communities of color, attacking immigrants, and the most recent policy before me is what will be a 6-week ban on abortion. And so despite Floridians overwhelmingly supporting access to a safe legal abortion, they want to see personal medical decisions be respected. We see Governor DeSantis not only banning abortion at 15 weeks last year, but now supporting a 6-week abortion ban, which is at a point where people do not even realize they are pregnant. But the fights don't just stop with, bodily autonomy. He goes as far to attack public education. He's defunded public education with House Bill 1, which is a major privatization policy agenda, and now is going after higher education. Florida is known for having some of the best, but also affordable universities in the country. We're at risk of losing that right now because Governor DeSantis has been pushing his culture wars and conservative orthodoxy into the classroom and trying to cancel certain majors and minors, abolish all programs that focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and even eliminating tenure, which is what House Bill 999 would do. And we've already seen him conduct hostile takeovers of different higher institutions, remove elected officials that he doesn't like. And again, it's not governing. We have before us an elections shell bill. By that, I mean a bill was filed to reform election policy, and the bill doesn't have anything in it but say this is a bill about elections. And the reason why that bill exists is so that my Republican colleagues with the endorsement of Governor DeSantis can do a strike call, change the context of that bill last minute, and make it harder for people to vote. We do not want this type of demagogue in the White House. We don't want to see others be inspired by Governor DeSantis to mimic his behavior. And I am sad to say that many of the policies that we're fighting back here in the state of Florida are being mimicked in other parts of the country. And we need to stop that, and we need to call that out and do what we can to build a world, build a society where every person has the equal chance to succeed and reach their fullest potential, where diversity is our strength, where academic freedom and the freedom to prosper is experienced by every American. And so with that, I thank so much for the opportunity to highlight these concerns, to be that canary in the coal mine. We are fighting back in every way we can in Florida, but we want other states to understand that the Florida DeSantis tries to express is not the reality for us on the ground. Our state systems are underfunded. People can't get unemployment benefits. They can't get, basic assistance. And we really are in a situation where if you are someone of means, then you have a chance to succeed. For everyone else, you see your taxes going up, you see your fees going up, you see your rights stripped away from you, which is why I keep stressing that every culture war really is a class war, because we're seeing a division of the haves and have-nots. For people who have means will be okay. When big corporations that don't have to pay all their taxes, they'll be okay. Meanwhile, their workers and everyday people will continue to suffer. And so thank you again. Unfortunately, I do have a caucus meeting, so I got to hop to that, but thank you so much for having me, and much love and solidarity with my colleagues in Pennsylvania.
Thank you so much, Representative. And with that, we're going to kick it to Representative Malcolm Kenyatta, who represents the 191st legislative district in Philadelphia, and has been an incredible advocate on so many fronts here. And then right after that, we will kick it to Eric Hagarty, also from Pennsylvania. So Representative Kenyatta.
JJ, good morning. Good morning, everybody. We're so lucky, I think everybody just heard it, to know that we have incredible legislators who are leading the charge in Florida against Governor DeSantis. And Representative Eskamani is just a perfect example of it. And of course, my brother and great friend and passionate fighter for all things good, Senator Jones. I'll just lead by making this critical point, and I think it really sums up who Ron DeSantis is, who his acolytes like Doug Mastriano, who said he wanted to make Pennsylvania the Florida of the North, who both of these gentlemen are. When all you can offer as a political leader is a list of people to hate, a bevy of things that we should ban, and then a marginalized group that we should blame for all the things wrong in the world, you do that because you don't have serious solutions to address the things that people are actually worried about. We know whether it's Florida or whether it's Pennsylvania, we have families who are desperate to know that their kid is going to get a quality education and that we're not going to use our classrooms as political battlefields to push a political agenda, but we're going to do what our schools actually need as elected officials. That's to ensure that the educators in those schools are treated with dignity and respect, that they have the resources necessary to educate our kids properly, to do the job that they want to do. Our teachers did not sign up to be teachers to be a part of a political jousting. They signed up because they understand the importance of us having an educated electorate. And Ron and Doug Mastriano, who's now talking about running for US Senate here in Pennsylvania, have made it clear that they're going to treat our teachers as enemies and treat our classrooms as places to throw bombs and not solve problems. That's first. But you also look at people who are worried about retiring with a level of dignity. One of the great connections that we have in Pennsylvania and Florida is, we call them up here, snowbirds who live in Pennsylvania half of the year. And then when the snow comes, they go down to Florida. And so we have this very, in some ways, symbiotic relationship in terms of the seniors who are going back and forth. And you know what? Folks are trying to figure out if they can live with a level of dignity and decency because they have social safety net programs like Social Security, like Medicare, like Medicaid. And look at Ron's record for years, wanting to cut Social Security, wanting to gut Medicare and Medicaid, putting folks in the golden years of their lives in a position where they're not able to have the level of security that they deserve. And then I'll make this final point. And I know we're all reeling from it, certainly here and in my district. The epidemic of gun violence is real. And I saw Senator Jones try to mark up a bill that's going to allow permitless carry. We just had a permitless carry bill in Pennsylvania last session that the Republicans passed. And thank God they did not have the votes to overturn Governor Wolf's veto at the time. But we see right now in Tennessee what happens when you allow permitless carry to move through a state. It's not Malcolm's opinion, it is the fact that the rates of gun crimes go up, the rates of gun homicides go up, the rates of gun suicides go up. And these folks who say they care about their communities would do everything in their power, actually, to make these communities less safe. And so don't tell me you care about law enforcement when you want to put more weapons of war on the street. Don't tell me you care about the people who protect us in our communities when you won't do nothing about armor-piercing bullets. Republicans voted down over and over and over again. And they call these bullets cop killers. And we're going to have more people who have ready access to these types of weapons to cause carnage on our streets, going the opposite direction of what every fact, figure, and damn good common sense would tell you about what to do as it relates to public safety. He would make our communities less safe. And you see what the legislature is doing in Florida, which is going to make Florida less safe. I will end with this because this is what we know for real. Drag queens are not the threat to our kids, but guns are. Books are not the threat to our kids, but an underfunded education system, that's a threat to our kids. And I will tell you, our seniors who are treated with more and more disdain by these leaders who pander to them when it's election time, but do everything they can to undermine their safety and security, they ought to be treated better. And we cannot trust carnival barkers like Ron DeSantis and Doug Mastriano to ever be focused on the things that we are focused on as legislators, on the concerns that our families and communities have. We deserve better than these people. And I think that as we continue to tell the truth, the ideology that they're pushing is not going to work. Doug Mastriano tried it, and he lost pretty bad. And as Ron DeSantis likes to say, go look at the scoreboard there. That type of broke ideology ain't going to work in Pennsylvania. And I know that with the senator and the representative in Florida, they're going to keep telling the world the truth about who Ron DeSantis is. And we're excited to be in this work with them. JJ, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative Kenyatta. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to former Pennsylvania Secretary of Education, Eric Hagarty, who can then, Eric, you can send it right to Senator Jones once you are done.
Thanks so much, JJ. Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Hagarty, and I recently had the great honor of leading Pennsylvania's Department of Education, where last year we secured the most historic increases in education funding in Pennsylvania history, to the tune of billions of dollars. We've really been making tremendous strides here in Pennsylvania in recent years. And I'm not a politician, so this is a bit out of the ordinary for me, but I felt compelled to speak up today because I have grave concerns about recent trends in education in some parts of the country that Pennsylvania really cannot afford to follow. And most of those concerns involve certain politicians unnecessarily injecting politics into our schools. What we've seen in Florida is really at odds with what school communities in Pennsylvania need and want. Here in Pennsylvania, we have over 250,000 dedicated professionals working in our schools, serving nearly 2 million students every day. These are normal people who are teachers, bus drivers, principals, superintendents, paraprofessionals, mental health professionals, counselors, support staff, librarians, cafeteria workers, the list goes on and on. And as you can imagine, among those 250,000 people, there are, of course, folks of all sorts of different political stripes, whether they be Republicans, Democrats, independents, or something else. I've met so many of them over the years as I've had the chance to spend time in classrooms all over Pennsylvania and get to know so many of these folks. And I can tell you one thing, every single one of them has in common, no matter what party they might belong to. None of them became a teacher or chose to work in schools because they cared about politics or pursuing a political agenda, as some politicians have falsely claimed. You know, it's of course normal and healthy to have debates and discussion about how to fund schools or how to improve graduation rates or how to solve some of these very real challenges schools are facing. But when politicians like Ron DeSantis and others try to do things like ban books or tell schools what classes they can or can't offer, or which words teachers can or can't say, it's not just an unnecessary distraction to those meaningful discussions we need to be having. It's an affront to the hardworking, decent people from all walks of life who make our schools function. So I take it personally on behalf of educators everywhere when I hear politicians accuse anyone in our education system of doing anything other than working their tails off every day to improve the lives of kids. These politicians on the fringes need to stop attacking schools. I think normal Republicans, normal Democrats, and normal independents all over Pennsylvania agree. Keep the politics out of our schools. You know, let us get back to the basics, teaching kids how to read, how to write, how to do math, how to set themselves up for a successful career in the trades, how to pursue higher education if they so choose. We don't need state mandates from politicians engaged in culture wars. We need politicians to get out of the way and to trust our local school leaders and our teachers and our librarians to do the jobs they're trained to do. Let's focus on making sure they have the resources they need to succeed instead of trying to micromanage them. Let's do what Pennsylvania Governor Shapiro is trying to do, which is reduce the reliance on standardized testing so teachers have more time to actually teach the stuff that matters. Unlike Florida, by the way, where the amount of time students are spending taking tests is actually going up during the DeSantis administration. Let's focus on increasing accessibility of career and tech ed options for students. Let's focus on improving the facilities students go to school in. Let's focus on expanding mental health supports for students. There's so many meaningful things like this that we could and should be focusing on, if not for the discord and chaos being sown by select politicians like DeSantis. And lastly, one of the reasons I'm so concerned about recent attempts to politicize our classrooms is that it really hurts the morale of all of these people I've spoken about who work so hard to provide opportunities for students. These attacks on the profession certainly aren't helping our educator shortage. We owe these educators and school professionals a debt of gratitude they have earned and certainly do not feel when this type of stuff happens. In the end, the challenges facing our educators, students, and systems are only made worse by the kind of discord and division being sown by politicians like Governor DeSantis. And unlike sunshine and warmer weather, that's not something that I think most Pennsylvanians are looking to import from Florida. Thanks so much, and I'll turn it over to Senator Jones.
Thank you so much, Eric. And it's a pleasure to be on here with all of you, especially my colleague, Representative Eskamani, who I know has gone back to the floor, and my very good friend and brother, who I'm proud to call him that, and that's Representative Malcolm Kenyatta. I really appreciate this opportunity. I want to start off by making it extremely clear that I have been warning us that this was going to happen. What's happening in Florida, I knew, and I've said it, that it was going to make its way across the country. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. My name is Shevrin Jones, and I have the privilege of serving in the 34th Senate District in Florida, but I'm also a former educator. And that's why what is happening in our state's education system is even more hurtful to me. Currently, right now in Florida, our children's freedoms and the freedoms of just everyday Floridians is under attack. Our children's freedom to learn is under attack by a governor who is a bully and is forcing his extreme right-wing politics into our classrooms, indoctrinating the minds of our children by trying to whitewash history. The governor, he calls Florida the free state of Florida, but let me give you some facts. Free states don't ban books. Free states don't ban ideas. Free states don't ban our children from being their true and authentic selves. Here's the truth. The truth is, right now in Florida, we are not free. Actually, we are far from free. We're actually turning into the fascist state of Florida, not the free state of Florida. This governor is banning the study of AP African American Studies. He's banning the works of Black authors. And now he's trying to even erase the shared history of millions of Americans from the books in our classrooms in all of our school districts. It's really not surprising, though, because the governor, he always has put himself and his corporate donors back in before everyday Floridians, or even in this case, everyday people. Florida's dirty little secret is this, though, that is not only is the governor attacking our freedoms in order to appeal to his presidential primary voters, but we are now the most unaffordable state to live in the nation. Families are living in their cars. Property insurance is just way too high. And all of this is happening on Governor DeSantis' watch, the Republicans' watch, and it is happening while the governor and the Republicans are turning their backs on everyday Floridians. Right now in Florida, rents are rising faster than the national average. Our insurance rates are 3 times the national average, and the median wages are lower in every single county than the national average. Does that sound like freedom? Does that sound like people who are living in a state that is thriving? Does that sound like a state to where we used to call this the place where people come to retire? No, that's not. While the corporate elites currently who have funded Ron's political ambitions have seen their profits skyrocket, costs for everyday people have gone through the roof while their wages have stayed low. And we now have a governor whose agenda is totally anti-freedom, anti-public education, anti-worker, and a corporate authoritarianism who is trying to inject politics into every aspect of our lives, with the rich get richer and everyday folks are getting left behind. Currently now in my district, I represent the largest Black district in the state of Florida. And I can tell you now, the policies that are being passed in Tallahassee are policies that are hurting my district. They are hurting everyday people outside of my district and other parts of this state. And my biggest fear is that the cultural wars that we are fighting here in Florida, as they continue to make their way across the country, and as Governor DeSantis prepared to run for president, that these are the things that Americans need to be wary of, that we are not a free state. We do not have a governor who's looking out for people. And this is the same guy who's going to travel this country to try to say that he has the best interests of Americans. I have news for you. He's not. The governor is dangerous. His policies are dangerous. The cultural war that he's spewing is dangerous. And he has taken us back into a time in history to where so many people like Malcolm Kenyatta's grandfather, fought hard to get us to where we are today. I promise you all that if we don't rise and we don't stand up to the type of policies that are coming out of these state legislatures, we will find ourselves fighting an uphill battle. We cannot let Ron DeSantis get 2 seconds close to the White House. And we need to fight like hell for the people who really needs us the most, who don't have the voice, who don't have the platform. And I tell you this, don't fall for his fake populism. Don't fall for his fake talk of freedom. And don't let this man become the president of the United States. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Moira Kaleida.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be on this call with all of you. My name is Moira Kaleida. I'm the National Director for the Alliance to Reclaim Our Schools. Our organization is a group of unions and education justice organizations across the country fighting for strong public schools. We are fighting the injustices we see, and we are supporting our teachers, we are supporting our students, and we are not going to let policies that harm children be part of Pennsylvania's legacy. We fought hard to protect these schools. We've pushed back on the extreme bills banning girls from playing sports. We've fought back on proposals of a Don't Say Gay bill that was worse than Florida's. And we fought attempts to privatize our schools and deprofessionalize the teaching profession. But we continue. Senator Benham and State Senator Williams. We've been able to fight and do really great things and stand up for our kids in PA. In a former lifetime, I was a school board member in Pennsylvania, and though we run a national organization, my heart is here and my home is here. And when I was on school board, we were able to pass legislation to affirm children's identities, to allow them to use the pronouns that they wanted to use. We passed legislation creating sanctuary schools, saying that no human, no student is illegal. We have all of our kids who deserve an education, especially our students with disabilities, who know that in public schools, they are guaranteed a legal right to that education. And if we don't have public schools, that goes away. They don't have those same rights in a private school. They don't have those same guarantees. So we know that we need to fight to preserve what we have here. So I want to say that we are in the midst of, we have just won a school funding battle here in PA, where we are going to recreate how we bring dollars to our students and how we drive those dollars to them. I am so hopeful, and I apologize, and so thankful to the legislators and to the community that lifted up that challenge and are bringing us this hope of new well-funded schools and success for our students. So as far as the Florida extreme policies are concerned, we say no thank you. We say no thank you to the hate and bigotry. And we in Pennsylvania will continue to stand with our public schools. Thank you. And I'm going to send it back to JJ.
Thank you so much, Moira, and to all of our participants. We are going to take questions now. If you do have a question, if you want to raise your hand or put it into the Q&A. And if you do raise your hand, I can take you off mute. I know Julia, we'll just get right to it and address the giant elephant in the room of the news of the day. But Julia from the Philadelphia Inquirer had a question regarding the announcement or the anticipated indictment of former President Trump. I just want to say up front, I think one thing that I think is really important is that this was a decision made by a jury of Donald Trump's peers. A grand jury is made up of everyday citizens who come together to evaluate evidence But we don't know yet what's in that indictment. And I think it's really important to note that politicians like Ron DeSantis and Doug Mastriano are rushing to say that this is improper or even worse, without even knowing what the evidence is or the charges are. And there's a lot of presumption, and I think we need to let the legal process play out. But I think it's indicative of a Republican Party that seems to have a real disconnect between what they say they want, which is us to be tough on crime and to hold people accountable. But then when President Trump is supposedly about to be held accountable for things that he did wrong, they're saying either that it's improper simply because he is the former president, or frankly, they're saying he may have done it, but he should get a pass because of that. So I think what we're seeing play out is a real rush to judgment against what a jury of Donald Trump's peers decided. But we should really wait and see what the prosecutor and the grand jury have to say before we overanalyze or interpret what's happening. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Representative Kenyatta, who I know also has some thoughts to share.
Thanks, JJ. For a guy who ran a campaign saying that he wanted to bring back law and order, this is in fact law and order. Folks who commit crimes, even if they're former presidents of the United States, get indicted for those crimes. And then there is a process by which the evidence in a public way is laid out, in which his defense attorneys will have an opportunity to cross-examine witnesses, to poke holes in the evidence, and to have, as JJ said, a group of his peers take a look at that conduct and see whether or not it violates New York State penal law. It's very simple. We are not a country if we don't have laws that everybody has to live by. And that goes from a person working in my district to somebody who used to work at the White House. We have to see what the charges are. I think this is actually a pretty, sobering moment for the country. But I also think it is an important moment for the country that we never say that because you were lucky enough to be in the White House, that crimes that you committed before that job and things that you did after or during that job, can't be prosecuted. And when you hear, Ron DeSantis say that he would use his power as governor, if possible, to hold up a subpoena, I think that flies in the face of our criminal justice system. And I think that, as has been said, this needs to play out. I think this is an investigation that's gone on for at least 5 years. And so I think it's been treated with a high level of care. And now the American people and the jury will get to look at the evidence and decide for themselves whether or not a violation of law occurred. That is the system we have. That is a system that only works if it's upheld, for everybody. And so I think the fact that our justice system has worked, even with the repeated attacks and threats and the anti-Semitism that is coming out of this from certain corners of the world, I think says good things about the future of America and good things about the rule of law.
Thanks, Representative. There's a question as well in the Q&A from Jacob from Florida Politics. I'm just going to read out loud so in case folks can't see it. There was a mention of Florida policies being emulated around the country. Are there any specific policies from DeSantis you see under consideration in PA that you find especially threatening or unnerving? So I'll just start by saying I think what in a lot of the policies are threatening and unnerving. One thing is that we had an election in 2022 where we had a DeSantis copycat on the ballot for governor, and he lost by 15 points. And that is large part because he pursued, he had a public stated agenda that was very similar to Governor DeSantis. He supported he was the prime sponsor of a 6-week abortion ban. We saw a huge backlash to that. He was the prime sponsor of a bill to get rid of a variety of gun safety restrictions. We saw a huge backlash to that. And he proposed a variety of attacks on public education, everything from funding to bathrooms to books and classes. And there we saw a huge backlash to that at the ballot box. And so I think it's clear that while we're seeing sort of copycat policies at the legislative level, we're also seeing them at the local level. We're seeing school boards run by right-wing Republicans pursue limitations on what classes can be taught, what teachers can say, and what books kids can read. And I think we're seeing across Pennsylvania, parents, teachers, community members organize and become more active in their school boards to push back against those. And so I think there's a clear rejection of the DeSantis agenda that's happening up and down the ballot and across levels of government. Does anyone else from PA? Do any other folks want to chime in from PA?
I can. I think that what you said is exactly right, JJ, that we are seeing some of these bills at a local level. And of course, like I mentioned, we have seen them at a state level where we have been able to bat them down. In Pennsylvania, school board members have unique powers that in other states they might not have. It is a very powerful seat. And what we've seen is districts that were once fully run by Republican school board members turn to now be full Democrat members, or going more people who are actually wanting to affirm and secure the rights of students. So the bills can mirror that. I think the community is really pushing back here.
JJ, the only thing I want to add to that is I think certainly in Pennsylvania, it's not even just a Democrat versus Republican thing. There are 500 superintendents in Pennsylvania, and I'd be willing to bet that more than half of them are Republicans, and they don't stand for this stuff either. So I think this is really about fringe ideology injecting its way into classrooms. And I think, normal Democrats and normal Republicans all across the state, again, agree that we need to just keep this type of stuff out of our schools. We don't need book bans. We don't need to tell teachers, what words they can or can't say. We don't need to tell school districts what classes they can offer. Instead, we need to be focusing on making sure they have the resources they need to succeed.
Thanks, everyone. I'm just gonna, the next question we have here is from James Call. And so how do you think DeSantis's labor practice will play in the Beaver Valley, where DeSantis's great grandparents settled? I did recently see a quote from Governor DeSantis talking about how he may have been raised in Tallahassee, but was metaphor, had I forget the word that he used, but was also raised, although he didn't live there, in Western Pennsylvania. I'd love to, I don't know if Senator Jones can give us a little perspective on some of the specific policies, but I think what we've seen overwhelmingly is that Pennsylvania is a union-friendly state. We are a state that has a long history of respect for workers and protection and putting protections in place. We are not a right to work state. And in fact, that was an issue that has played out in a series of executive elections, particularly in our governor's races over the last decade, and has really seen backlash. We have a strong labor union going all the way from service workers to trade workers, and while they may differ on some policies, there is no gap. There is no room between any of them when it comes to protecting the right of workers in Pennsylvania to organize and to fight back. We are seeing a historic amount of organizing happening here in Pennsylvania, from baristas to education workers at our universities, to all sorts of industries. And so I think if Ron DeSantis thinks he's going to come to Pennsylvania and talk about how he's helping big corporations and his big donors crush labor rights in Florida, and that I think he's going to have a rude awakening if he brings that message anywhere near, particularly Western Pennsylvania, where there's a really strong labor history and trade, particularly with the trades, a long history of hard-fought battles for those rights. Senator Jones?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it all, but I also want to remind people that when we're talking about our union workers, these are not Democrat and Republicans. These are just people. They're not looking at it from a party perspective. And I think you're right, JJ. The governor is going to have a very hard time, especially in the Northeast, where I'm talking about where unions thrive, and you all have a large unions there. And I think it's important to point out that the governor and the Republicans in Florida, they did this to go directly at teachers because of the teacher union here in Florida. But the unintended consequence of that is that you have your 911 workers who fall into this category, who now have to reach this 60% threshold. You also have your nurses who now have to reach this 60% threshold, or they become decertified. And these are the type of policies that, as JJ just made mention of, that the governor is going to have to travel the country and defend. And I want you to try to defend a worker's rights and which is their constitutional right, to these people, and you're telling them that you want to be their president. I don't think it's going to work as well as you think it is.
Thanks, Senator Jones.
And JJ, can I also just say quickly,
Yeah.
we talk about the worker aspect of this, but also you've seen that he has praised his interjection into the free market as well. If you're a business owner who hasn't cut a big enough check to him, I would be really, really worried at him using the levers of power to go after companies and corporations, but really need to recognize, like, the end of that is not just going to be Disney World. He went after a private company because they didn't support a piece of legislation. And for folks who say they, care about the business community, who support policies like, support decisions like Citizens United, that businesses are people and should be able to voice their own political decisions. The hypocrisy of this is real. But also it's really bad for our economy, where the leader of the free world, or the leader of any state, is picking and choosing winners and losers based on whether or not they support his political agenda. That is very dangerous for workers and for the companies that they work with as well. So if you're a business owner in Pennsylvania, you should be very worried.
Thank you to everybody. I think that is all that we have here today. So please feel free to follow up with us if you have any additional questions. But I think you heard a lot here today about how Governor DeSantis' agenda has caused huge problems in Florida for everyday people, and especially those who he targets as his enemies. And how such an agenda would be at odds with what people are looking for here in Pennsylvania, whether you're an educator or a parent or a worker, that we are a state that welcomes everyone, that we are a state that respects the right to organize. We are a state that overwhelmingly has a pro-abortion rights population, and we value and celebrate our public school system, which we have worked so hard across the last decade to not just fund, but really help recover from deep cuts during the recession. So I think there's a lot that Governor DeSantis is going to say tomorrow that really doesn't hold up to what he actually pursues. And we're hopeful that this call was helpful in better understanding what he's done and what Pennsylvanians are actually looking for. So thanks, everybody. And if you have any other questions or follow-up, please feel free to reach out to the team of either at Florida Watch or on my team. Thanks so much.